Welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's a podcast about recovery. And my road to recovery began with Pinnacle Recovery Center. If you know somebody who needs some help, do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery a call. So we're here today, and I've got Dr. Matt. How are you?
Doing really good. How are you, Casey?
You seem like you struggled with the choice of words there.
It was a rough go, but I think I landed it.
I think we've done this long enough to where that's normally what I'm going to go with, is I'm going to ask you how you're doing.
Should I be prepared for that every
I would
time?
think so, yeah.
Okay, all right.
So how are you doing today, Dr. Matt?
I'm great.
That's awesome. And we got Tilton back there. And, last week we kind of talked about addictive behaviors, and I also told a little bit about my recovery and the thing that I'm struggling with the most, which is kind of the guilt, and the guilt that I've had to take all these people on a ride with me that didn't have a choice.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there on my couch, and Tilton's been putting together these wonderful promos that we've been putting out on Instagram and Facebook. And I'm sitting there, and I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden I hear my voice, and my phone's in my pocket. And I'm like, whoa, hey, that's me. And I still get excited to hear my voice. And I look over, and my 11-year-old daughter, who's on Instagram, is listening to that promo.
Oh.
And I didn't know what to think, and so I didn't say anything. So I just watched her. Mm-hmm. And this is the one where I'm apologizing.
Right. No, it's actually kind of a powerful, more somber promo.
Yeah. And so I'm apologizing to her mom. And, I'm getting a little choked up, right? And so she gets done with it, and she just looks up, and she looks at me, and I look at her, and I just go, "You okay?" She goes, "Are you?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm okay." She goes, "I'm proud of you, Dad."
Oh, that's nice.
And it could have gone both ways, because here's an 11-year-old that has Instagram, that has the internet, that has access to this podcast, that has to now go along this ride with her dad, who doesn't have a license, who's kind of airing my dirty laundry out there, trying to help people, but more importantly, help myself. Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, and I had a meeting with another guy from We Are One Recovery, and I was talking about my kids. And I think the most valuable lesson I can teach my kids is that when bad things happen, it's not what you do when they happen, it's what you do after they happen.
Yeah.
And so if I could teach my kids that, hey, sometimes bad things happen, and what really is important is what you do after that.
Well, that's where character comes from, I think. Like, we're not born with a positive character. I think character comes as a result of how we respond to stressors and crises in our life. And actually, kids learn vicariously or by observation. And so the fact that you are airing your dirty laundry, so to speak, and you are sharing your recovery from this problem, that's teaching your kids, hopefully. I mean, it's available for them to learn. That's how we have good character. That's how we deal with our problems, as we take them head on and we fix them. No problem's too big that we should ever give up. And I would assume that part of the reason your daughter said, "I'm okay," is she's in that process of building character so that when she's older and faced with, we don't know what our kids are going to be faced with, but when they're faced with their challenges, she may not remember that exact instance, but it will be a brick in the foundation of her character.
In a perfect world, I'd want my daughter's day to be filled with choices of, is it Lagoon or Cherry Hill?
Yeah,
what kind of flavor
that.
do I want on my snow cone? Exactly. I don't want her dealing with, is my dad okay because he's going through recovery? But the reality is, unfortunately, that's the world that she's in and that I live in. And so,
but that's more valuable. Kids who grow up with those, simple choices between two good things all the time and never dealing with stress, I honestly don't feel that they're as strong in their personality and character as they get older. They struggle with things as an adult that other adults are prepared for. So, personally, even though with my kids, same thing, I'd rather have them be choosing between Otter Pops and Rocket Pops, and that's how their summer goes. Definitely. I would love that, but these are the valuable experiences that build a strong character for adulthood, because life is hard and challenging, and if you don't quit and give up, if you continue to model this positive response that you've had since last fall, it's going to really help her.
And I hope so. And so that brings us to our next guest. We've got Boyd here. Now, the way I met Boyd was kind of random, because last weekend my girlfriend went out of town. And as we know, she's my ride.
Right.
So she went to St. George with her daughter, and I've got her dog, and I'm at home. I don't have my kids. I don't have a ride. So it's got me on the bed and her dog Truman on my feet, and I'm watching live PD, and I just saying, this is my Saturday night.
There you go.
Well, Boyd comes on Instagram and goes, watch out for that live PD. It'll suck you in. And next thing I know, 4 hours later, I'm still watching live PD.
Yeah.
But I started a conversation with Boyd, and you were telling me that you've been dealing with a daughter and addiction for the past 15 years. And you had mentioned that if we wanted to talk to a family member and get their perspective, you'd be more than willing to come on and talk about it. So that's how we met, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how we met, yes.
And so, first off, do you love live PD?
I do like live PD, but it will suck you in, and you're right. 4 hours later, you will be sitting there because you've got to find out what happened to the lady in the convenience store parking lot in Alabama that had...
No pants on.
That had no pants on. You have to find that out. You must know.
So let's go into kind of your story. That's how we like to start on the podcast. Sure. Is your daughter's been addicted to what?
My daughter was addicted to heroin and marijuana.
And did it start with marijuana?
It started out with marijuana when she was about 14, 15 years old. Took us a while to figure that out. We always knew through high school that she was, smoking pot and doing some things that she wasn't supposed to be doing. And as parents, you try to discipline, you try multiple things to try to get them to change their behavior.
Like what kind of things did you try? Because I know when I was, in high school, the parents had a strict rule: no drinking, no drugs.
Yeah.
But they also, my dad had a side conversation with me. He goes, hey, look, I've got better things to do with my time than follow you around and make sure you're not getting in trouble. It's going to become a problem when it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So let's not make it a problem.
Okay.
And
He's trying to give you a little autonomy to self-regulate.
Because I think kids will experiment.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what you're saying with your daughter is, she's going to do it, but how do you set the rules? Where do you do it?
Right. I think it started with experimentation. I did when I was younger, right? And you start by, taking away privileges. She had a car, you take the car away. Cell phones were just starting to come out to where, some high school kids had cell phones. My philosophy with my kids is you don't get a phone unless you can pay for it, right? She had a job, she was paying for it, tried taking the phone away. It just became a real battle. My daughter was... she was kind of defiant from 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
This was a child.
A personality trait.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Very, very defiant from very early on. Wonderful kid, beautiful, just happy-go-lucky. But man, when she didn't want to do something, she didn't do it.
Now, is she your only child?
No, I have 4.
Okay,
she fits right in the middle. I would tell you that there's probably a little bit of that middle child thing going on.
Yeah.
I am too, Casey. So I get it, right? But what was crazy in high school is this was a 3.9 student, excellent grades. Somebody who danced probably 16 hours a week on a dance team. Mm-hmm. Traveling all over the place.
Competitively.
Doing dance competitions all over the place. And, just kind of fell in with it, with the wrong kids. She made her choice, right? But friends are everything.
Yeah.
And I do believe that.
Friends are very important to an adolescent's development and actually to our adult life, how we deal with others. If we don't have a positive experience as adolescents, it's harder as an adult. But just to recap here, you have a beautiful, happy, probably outgoing personality daughter who is involved in extracurricular competitively. She gets a 3.9 GPA. She's working. How did you pick up on the signs that she was starting to use and experiment? What started to tip you off?
Friends changed, right? I'll call it a semi-religious family. Only my wife would tell you we're a religious family. I would say we're probably more like a semi-religious.
How about
family.
Religious light?
Hey, that's a perfect way to put it. That's a great way to put it, Matt. And so, you kind of pick up different people at church would say things, hey, you should look at this or you should look at that. But even just behavior in the home had changed a bit. People will say, well, their grades will drop, they'll do these things. None of that happened with her.
Okay.
Right?
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, none of those terrible things that people
The
tell
telltale
you
marks.
the telltale marks of somebody who's getting into...
Pretty subtle.
That's getting in. It was very subtle.
Didn't come home with tattoos or...
Oh, no, she's got tattoos, Casey. She's tattooed from head to toe.
But not at 15. Or was she? All right.
I would say
gotcha.
pretty close around.
Okay,
that.
all right.
Probably when she got her first tattoo. I probably didn't know anything about the
Yeah,
first
it's
tattoo.
probably hidden well. Huh?
Right, but yes, some of those things started happening. Crowd changed. She ended up with this boyfriend. Funny, she was hanging out with somebody in the neighborhood that my wife and I thought, oh, if there was anybody in the neighborhood we would want her to be with, we would want her to be with this person. Mm-hmm. And then we start hearing all kinds of, crazy things about this person. I'm like, oh no, that can't be the case. Mm-hmm. And then you start doing some investigation on your own and you're like, oh, not only is that the case, but it gets worse, right?
Okay.
And you find out about, this crazy, I'll call it like club or whatever, group of kids in our neighborhood that they were getting together at night, they were sneaking out, they were smoking weed, they were doing all of these, all of the things that, some people would tell you, kids just do that. Right?
Adolescent rebellion does happen, and I think as parents we should probably expect it and realize that there is a developmental quality to it that's important. But it doesn't mean that it's okay necessarily, because it often does, cross the lines into illegal behaviors, unhealthy, unsafe behaviors.
Right.
So, yeah.
And, and the one thing that I was really concerned with is, delving into kind of my story, I guess, a little bit, is I grew up with an alcoholic father. Addiction is rampant in my family, and it's something that my kids will tell you that I preached it. We had conversations about it, right? About it's not a matter, if you do these things, bad things are going to happen to you, that there is a better than even chance that you could become addicted to whatever it is that you're doing.
So you were aware enough of that you wanted to kind of guard against it with your kids.
Yeah, and as my children got into teenage years, I counseled with every one of them on the dangers of doing that.
Were they receptive, or did they just think, oh, you're just being a dad?
I think that it was, you're just being a dad. I don't think they never knew my dad as an alcoholic. They never knew their grandpa as an alcoholic.
So they thought you were just giving them the worst case scenario and doing what dads do and just scaring them.
Yeah, because they didn't see it, right? They didn't grow up with that. They didn't. I mean, I saw my dad literally tear apart a house at 18 when I was 18 years old, and really go off the deep end. I had to call the police and have him arrested because it got so intense one night.
Whoa.
Right? My children didn't ever see that. They didn't know that side of my father. Now, over the years later, my dad and I were able to make amends and have a really good relationship and everything else. And he would tell me, on many different occasions, I was not a good father. I was not a good role model. There were the whole, and I'm seeing this a little bit with my daughter, Casey, and I'm sure that you've gone through it a little bit as well, is the whole the regret factor.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The I can't tell you how sorry I am. I can't say I'm sorry enough. Right. And my daughter's going through that a little bit right now. And, but so you preach to your kids, you tell them, look, you can't do these things. Our bodies are just not made for this. I'm sorry, but you got dealt a really bad hand when it came to genetics. I can't control that. You can't control
We talk about
that.
People being at risk or at high risk if they have, that addiction running in their family. And it doesn't matter that your father struggled with alcoholism, just that propensity to be addicted to any substance. Anybody should be afraid of it. But for listeners, like you were aware of, if it runs in your family, you're at higher risk than a person who doesn't have it in their family.
Right.
And so your daughter is experimenting with marijuana through the high school years. When was the first kind of big blow up, I guess, that that it came to a boiling point?
when she was 18 years old. It got to a point to where we were trying to do something for her, get her to take care of what we thought was a pretty chronic problem by that point. And her and I had a giant blow up in my garage. And she finally looked at me and, she said, I don't have to put up with this crap. I'm 18 years old. And I'm like, nope, you really don't. And honestly, she up and moved out that night with a boyfriend.
Wow. Was she still in high school or had she graduated?
No, she had graduated.
Okay.
And it just came to a boiling point.
How did that affect you as a father?
Oh, it's devastating, right? As a parent, you look back and you say, what more could I have done? What did I do wrong? Right.
Yeah.
I think that's
we all do that.
I think
parents,
that is. I think that's the first place that you go as a parent when you have a child that's really struggling this way. Is there's just a lot of introspective that's going on, and you just say, "What did I do wrong with this child?"
Can I ask you? Do you think you did something wrong?
You know what, Casey? Now I don't. Right now I've realized through education, through some counseling of my own, and a lot of hard work on myself mentally. No, I don't think that I did something wrong. Are there things I could have done different with each one of my children? Yeah, but I think that's just parenting. There's no book.
Yeah. Because when I was in my active addiction, my mom would say, I wish I'd have did something different. I go, what?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I go, Mom, somehow you're kind of making this about you, and this is not you. It was, and she wasn't meaning it that way. She just wanted to take the blame. And I go,
Right.
Mom, there's no blame on you. This is me.
I think it starts, as a parent, you bring the child into the world, and when they're little, it is all up to you, right? You change them, you feed them, you do all that stuff. And as they get older and gain more independence, which on the one hand we want them to have, on an emotional level, I think as a parent, you still have this misconception that you can help them always in all things. And so when our kids struggle with whatever it is, learning disabilities, addiction, any sorts of problems, you start to wonder, could I have done something more, because you want to be able to control that. And I think it isn't until you become a seasoned parent and the kids are out of the house that you look back and you say, well, I could have done things differently, but I'm not, I didn't do things wrong. What I did didn't cause these problems. These problems happened. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most liberating and healthy things in these sorts of situations, and I'd be interested to hear what you think, is when we get past the blame game and we just say, this is what happened, this is how it is, right and wrong, good, bad need to be thrown out, and we just deal with how things are. And I think for parents, that's liberating, and it gets us past what your mom was saying to you, which is that self-blame, which just creates depression.
Yeah, and I would tell you that it took me 15 years to get there.
Oh, yeah, it's not a short trip.
To get there to the point to where you're not blaming anymore, and you're saying, okay, this is the hand we've been dealt. What can we do here, right? How do we help her? And she left the house at 18.
She's living with her boyfriend.
And she's living with her boyfriend, and that relationship is, I'll call it a toxic relationship, because I think it was a toxic relationship. I think she ended up in a verbally abusive, not a physically abusive relationship. I'm not a very big guy, but I probably would have tore him apart if it was a physical relationship. I didn't know how mentally abusive it was. How
was your relationship with her at the time?
It's weird because it's kind of off and on. If you didn't talk about the elephant in the room, it's great, right? Everybody's great. It's all good and everything else. But if you started talking about the elephant in the room, then all of a sudden she was really good about making it your problem. There's a deflection that goes on, right? It comes right back, and it's like, whoa, wait, how did this become about me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like, this is not about me. This is about
you. Threaten her ability to maintain her addiction.
Yes, and that's really what it is, right? Is you start threatening that way. And, with her, I'd say like those first 5 years after she left the house, we knew what was going on, right? I don't know when she moved on from marijuana to, I know how she got to heroin, right? And it all started, I know, with pills, because I know that she had a problem there. As a dancer, she had injury after injury, right? Doctors are really good about writing scripts.
Yeah.
right?
It's improving, I hope.
I hear that it is, and I see that it is.
But as a listener to our show, you know that almost without exception, folks who have come on this podcast have talked about an injury happens, pain pills prescribed, and then they have that tendency to abuse, and it turns into an addiction.
Yeah, and I think that I think your last week's guest mentioned it, where they were doing pain pills, and then somebody suggested, hey, if you smash this up and snort it, it's even more awesome than if you just take it, right?
Right. So they learn to abuse that prescription.
Yeah, and I know that at some point it graduated to that point as well. And all along the way when we would see her, right, and you knew this was going on, there was never a time where I didn't offer, let's get you some treatment. You've got a huge problem here. Let's take care of it. And it just always became this huge battle about, I don't have the problem. You have the problem. I don't need treatment. I don't need help. It's, it's just weed. Everybody does weed. It's legal in some states, and you have that argument and all of those things. I will tell you that my daughter became a drug expert. I will tell you probably better than some pharmacists that I even know, to where she could tell you and justify and explain away all these different things on why she's doing what and why it's not bad for her and why this isn't a problem for her and I don't have a problem. And
that's that addict's brain, which is
the rationalization, justification.
Oh yeah,
there you go, exactly right. And if she was a smart kid to start with, which she obviously was, that was probably felt awful trying to argue her out of it.
You couldn't argue, right? There was no arguing, and there was no having what I would call a really rational conversation. And and it would get better for a while, and I know for her it would get better for a while, and you could see the times when she wasn't either not using or not using as much, because she would look healthier. She would be a whole lot more pleasant to be around. Things would go really well, and then another injury would happen. Here come the pain pills again, and then right back into the problem again. And then, you just this vicious cycle of having the same conversations over and over.
Let me ask him just one question real quick, because you said every time you saw her and she wasn't doing good, you would offer to get her treatment.
Yeah.
And she would talk you out of it and say that it was your problem. And I just want to know what it's like to be a parent.
Sure.
When she says no and you offer her help and she's got a problem, when you get in the car, what's your feelings? What do you?
It's frustrating, right? It's a whole plethora of emotions. You shed a lot of tears. I didn't think I was going to get emotional, but you just constantly pray for that person, saying, find her some help, but help her to see that she's got this problem, because we all see it as a family. We all see it. Even at the beginning, the siblings didn't really say much, because there's this unwritten pact between siblings. Loyalty,
right?
Yeah,
it's us against them.
Did any of the siblings struggle with addiction or abuse?
No, not so far. I mean, I have my oldest daughter struggles really bad with depression, which is another hereditary trait, another one of those bad gene traits that we got dealt, as a family, and she really struggles with that. Still struggles with that today, and tries to deal with it. My other kids, they all drink socially, but I would tell you I don't see the same signs in the others that I saw with them. Sometimes I worry about that.
Sure.
Sometimes I do really worry about my other kids and whether or not they are drinking too much.
Yeah. I think as a follow-up to Casey's question, it felt like you were describing kind of a sense of feeling powerless. You as a parent going to them with a solution, offering help, and then feeling powerless and giving it up to a higher power.
That's a great way of putting it, because you do as parents feel powerless, and then it starts affecting all of your relationships. It affects your relationship with your wife. It affects the relationship that you have with the siblings. It affects the relationship that you have with outside family members. Because I can't tell you how many family members would tell me, oh, she's just a kid. She's going to outgrow this. All kids go through this phase. She'll outgrow it. Yeah. And I'm like, outgrow it? By this time she's in her 20s. I'm like, she's 20-something years old. At what point do you outgrow it?
Why do you think they said those things? What was their purpose?
Because I think that they saw like either their own children, or I'll even use my own family, for example. My mom saw it with my other kids, but I had an older sister, and I actually had an older sister who died from opiate addiction.
Oh, wow.
At a young age. No, wow. I'm telling you, Casey, it gets the story is all intermixed and intermingled with my family, and
that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because the rippling effect. Oh, yeah. I know when I was in my addiction, and I had conversations with my dad, had conversations with my mom, my ex-wife, my kids, and I would say, "Why do you guys care? It's just me. I want to do what I want with my body and my life. Exactly. And you can't tell me what to do with my body. You can't tell me what to do with my life." But the reality is that's not how this works. And if you're a family, I've got kids, I've got responsibilities, I've got parents, and the rippling effect affects all of their relationships. And, I think you were saying that you saw that it was this spider web of just craziness.
Right. Yeah, and it just you can just see it spiraling out of control. And my sister was the same way. My sister was off and on pills of all kinds of different kinds. She was you can't do it anymore today because of the systems that are in place. But man, she was an expert doctor shopper.
Yeah.
Right? You won't give me this? I'll go find me a guy who will. What do I need to say to this guy to go get what I need to get?
Back in the day, people would have 3, 4, 5 doctors prescribing the same thing for them.
Yeah, my mom was...
We couldn't check.
Yeah, my mom was the same way. Tried to get her in treatment. My sister had been through treatment 3 or 4 different times. Always went back to her crutch. Right? Would blame all these different ailments. And my sister also had chronic depression, as did my dad. And so that drove a lot of her addiction, drove my dad's addiction.
And that's a common co-occurring issue where a person struggles with a mental health issue. Most of like you were mentioning your family, I think everybody who's honest, our families struggle with anxiety or depression or those sorts of things we inherit. And then drugs and alcohol become a dirty quick fix, which causes abuse and addiction over time. And so a person struggling with depression can often self-medicate and end up with now depression and an addiction. Yeah.